Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour, and I'm your host, Mike Thomas. In case you missed it, the latest blog post is out, and it's all about, well, blogs. So one thing I will encourage you to do before even reading the post is go out there and look for some blogs. Check out some things that you like, maybe that you don't like. Come back, read the post that we wrote here from OITA that is all about how to use blogs in the classroom and how to use them well. One of the things that we always run into is, well, how do I use it? Well, the possibilities are endless. This blog post that we wrote talks all about it, but ultimately it comes down to you and your teaching style. In case you missed it, one of the key videos I made this past few weeks is all about getting 2016 OneNote on your computer. Now, you may be wondering if you have Windows 10, which OneNote you have. Most likely it's the built-in one. Which OneNote has the best use of the tools is OneNote 2016. So in this video, there is directions on how to download the OneNote that will work best for you as a teacher in the classroom to not only distribute work, but also have the immersive reader and the dictate function all available to you. So go out and check that video. It's on Microsoft Stream, which you can be found in Office 365. In case you missed it, we are in the midst of doing infrastructure trials for MCAS. You don't want to be showing up next month when you begin your MCAS testing and not be prepared. The infrastructure trial is one of those key tools that we use at the beginning of the testing season to make sure that everything works correctly and that there are no surprises come testing day. So make sure that you've scheduled one in your building. Talk with your test coordinator about it. In case you missed it, there have been updates to education.microsoft.com. They continue to put out quality training videos on how to use their tools. One that I am super excited about is Paint 3D. Yes, you heard me right, Paint 3D. So think about all the great things you could do with Paint, and now think about the things you wish you could do, like make three-dimensional objects. Well, Paint can do it. There are training videos out there for you to check out. I know by the time this podcast airs, I will have completed the videos to learn how to use this tool because I am super excited about it and excited to share it with you. So that's at education.microsoft.com and look for the Paint 3D tiles. In case you missed it, We Learn Wednesdays are still happening. Last Wednesday we were kind of, snowed out and all. But this week, we are planning on being there at the Melanie Kesperson Professional Development Center over down off of St. James, right next to the DMV. So if you see the DMV, you drive around back and you will see the PD Center. This week, we have sessions, and then we'll be back 2 weeks, and then we are looking at rescheduling the one that was snowed out. So if you have not yet signed up, please go out to My Learning Plan and sign up there. It gives us a better idea of how many people are coming. That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Take. For this week's Hot Take, you're going to hear the last part of the conversation that we had all about digital reading and reading online. It's a very interesting conversation, and one that we just couldn't even do it justice in the amount of time that we spent talking about it. There's just so many different things to think about, and I encourage you to do some research on your own and to think about your teaching practices along with this new technology that is here to stay. So go ahead and take a listen.
Right. I'd love to learn from our listeners, from our teachers, what they're doing to help their students be more successful reading online. how they're handling it, what strategies they're teaching them, what percentage of their students regularly do read online. I was surprised at this other fact, and I'll read this. This is from How Should Reading Be Taught in a Digital Era by Leanna Heitlin, and this was written in 2016. According to survey data from the 2015 National Assessment of Educational Progress, only about 1 in 10 fourth graders use computers to access reading-related websites on a daily basis, or nearly every day at school. 1 in 10 fourth graders. About 30% of students in fourth grade classrooms never or hardly ever use computers to access such reading material in school.
And then I guess you have to wonder how many of those fourth graders are accessing reading materials at home via tablets, computers, etc. So I guess that's kind of the frustrating part, right? I mean, we're trying to encourage students to be more adept in a digital age. We're training them to be 21st century learners, but they're learning one thing at school and they're coming home to another form of reading or media. So you can see where the confusion lies, right? There's a line here that's kind of drawn in the sand, and until it's blended, until students are taught at the same pace from a kindergarten level all the way through to their completion of high school, how to facilitate both styles of reading, we're going to continue to see these kind of studies where it's just an odd mix. And I think that's why it's such an important discussion.
With it being important for our students, I think the larger overarching thing is like, this is how they're being tested. If my understanding is correct, Brendan, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you are our resident MCAS expert in here. But next year, there's no waivers. Like, people are taking MCAS online no matter what.
That is correct.
And so they need to be able to read digitally. They need to be able to comprehend digitally. So I think we're at this point where we're reading these studies and we're seeing, they comprehend better on paper-based than they do digitally based. Because of the way that the Massachusetts and the larger country is shifting away from paper-based, what are the things that we can do to prepare them better than what we have already? Because some of these kids have been taking tests 2-3 years online.
Well, I think we just have to, again, have this conversation, not just at the district level throughout the country, but at the school level with our administrators, with our teachers, and with our education system at the college level. I mean, I'm pretty sure the SAT is online now too. Like most standardized testing throughout the country is going to be online. You fill out a job application online. You complete a resume online. So, I totally understand the want and need to allow students to read text from paper. It's totally understandable. I still enjoy reading magazines that are paper-based in the newspaper and so on and so forth. But for those folks who are holdouts on digital learning and online collaborative reading and online storytelling, the train's kind of leaving the station, and you can see where the trend's heading. And I don't think anybody could really make an argument that it's going to shift and go back the other way, and computers are going to disappear, and we're going to go back to paper-based reading and paper and pencil writing. I think you kind of see where we're going. So it's more of an acceptance than anything. And as professionals, teachers, people in digital learning like ourselves, it's our responsibility to acknowledge that and to provide the best form of education that we can to our stakeholders. And in this case, it's the students.
Very well said, Brendan. I'll just add one additional thought that I forgot to mention earlier in one of the strategies that teachers can use is to make sure that their students are aware of the purpose when they're reading. So I think in the past or over time, if they are given a reading on paper and the teacher is guiding them, it's very clear what the objective is. But sometimes when they get on a computer, they think that it's just a game or it's not as important. So for the teachers to emphasize the purpose of their reading and to utilize all the same strategies that they use when they've got a book in front of them when they're reading something online.
Absolutely. And I just have to kind of piggyback on top of that because And I have a niece who, I think every time I see her, has her mother's phone in her hand and she's playing a game, right? So I think you see that as a common trend throughout our country, or within our own families, right? Our youngsters are confiscating their parents' phone to play, Temple Run or Bedazzled or whatever games they can get their hands on. So that's why, again, it's so important to, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's so important to establish that, reading online is reading from a young age in the kindergarten and elementary level. So that students aren't just thinking, oh, well, here's the computer, it's time for fun. And not that reading isn't fun, but that they understand that it serves the same purpose in a different way. In most ways, I think all of us could agree, it kind of opens the lens up for them, again, away from that linear to the nonlinear world that is 21st century learning.
Exactly. And believe it or not, Mike, I am totally advocating for the online reading, and just comparing it to the old days where you might be reading a book and you come across a word that you don't know the meaning of, and you'd have to physically get up and find the dictionary and find the word in the dictionary, and then go back to your reading, and by that time you've forgotten half of what you've read. Now with digital text, it's just a click away.
I mean, not just digital text. I often hear people talk about audiobooks now becoming a key theme. I mean, just the way reading is done in general is just transforming. And of course, audiobooks can be an exceptional accessibility feature for students with disabilities. We see that often in our schools where students are using audiobooks to help pace with their reading. So really, when I say the train's left the station, the technology is just advancing at such a pace. And it's really exciting to see.
It is.
Well, that wraps up our conversation all about digital reading. And like I mentioned at the beginning of today's podcast, make sure that you do some research for yourself and find out what's going to work for you and your students, and how you can best integrate online reading and those skills that are needed for it into your own daily lessons. Coming up next, our interview with Kiaga Osborn-Johnson from Sumner Ave. For this week's interview, we interview a teacher from Sumner Ave, Kiaga Osborn-Johnson. One of the great things about being in the position that I am, I get to go out and do all these interviews, so it was fun to meet Kiaga, and also it's all great to get suggestions about people who to interview from other teachers, and that was the case with Kiaga. And so go ahead, take a listen. She's doing some amazing things in her classroom.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiaga Osborn-Johnson. I am a 5th grade ELA and social studies teacher here at Sumner Ave School. I love it here. This is my 5th year of teaching, but my 3rd year in the district.
All right, so coming into the district and you're outside teaching, what were some of the first things that you used technology-wise in the classroom?
I think technology is a great tool to help students continue to be engaged in your classroom. So one of the first things that I used was PowerPoint. For my vocabulary, I used those PowerPoint slides and the animations and the transitions just to grab their attention. Not going overboard, but it helps with some of our word work, the work that we're doing in the classroom.
So now, would you make the PowerPoints or would you have the students make the PowerPoints?
every day, part of our reading block is word work. So as whole group word work, and when we're doing vocabulary, when we're reading a chapter book, I always use Prezi or PowerPoint as a way to present the information to the students.
Other than PowerPoint, because a lot of those animations can be a lot of fun, especially the ones that make noises and all of that, what are some other things that you've used in the classroom?
Well, I love Brightspace for my social studies block. So in social studies, as we read new material, if we're reading a chapter book or if we're reading information, presently we are starting the American Revolution. So I use Brightspace in their discussion board. So I ask the students a question and they answer the question, and then they're allowed to answer and talk to 3 of their peers in the classroom. So they have a full discussion board of answering back and forth to each other. And I find that the discourse between the students themselves really helps them understand the material.
So with using discussion board, I've heard from some other teachers that there's a lot of training that has to go into it, because that initial time when they start using it, it's all hi, 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 and there's like 30 posts of the same thing. Did you have to do a lot of pre-teaching with that, or were the students pretty comfortable in doing exactly what they needed to do?
There always is pre-teaching and modeling when it comes to the students with technology. And I just think that we shouldn't be afraid of that pre-teaching stage. So on the board, I put up in my freeze for my whiteboard all of the things that I was looking for in their answers. So the students had something that was projected on the board, and they knew that I was looking for at least 3 sentences, that I wanted them to start off with a greeting to their neighbor, and I wanted them to ask at least one question so that the person would be able to respond back to you and you would have to respond back to them.
So along with the discussion boards, I've also heard a few teachers say, I don't know if you've experienced this or not, students who use text typing, where it's like instead of writing YOU for you, they'll just use the U and they'll try to do that. So did you have any of that happen at the beginning? Or?
And it still happens.
It's still
of
happening.
Course. But there are ways to go in. As a teacher, you're able to go in and write your own discussion, so you can send them a message and they usually fix it because they have the choice to edit their posts.
That's true. In social studies, you're using Brightspace for the discussion board. Are you using Brightspace for anything else? Or are you using a different LMS or different tools? Or
we're using Microsoft 365 when we're writing when we're doing response to literature, when we're in ELA. So the students are writing and they're sending me their information or sharing their papers with me. I am looking forward to starting Kaizena. It is an app that you can use. It's free. And the students upload their papers. You're able to give them recorded voice feedback or highlighted feedback, or you're able to edit in real time. So if the students are in your classroom and they're typing when I send it to you, whatever you type to them in real time shows up on their laptop. So it's a great way to communicate, and you can upload videos or embed information with that. So the student automatically, if they're having problems with commas, you can send them a video that deals directly with commas, and then they can listen to that. So they're getting that individual feedback.
which is always very important, especially with the students that you are teaching who desperately want that feedback so they can improve themselves. So,
in 5th grade, we have students that come to us. We are transient, as we all know, in Springfield. So some students have spent lots of time on laptops, and then others have not. So even like ourselves professionally, everyone is everywhere. So you have to, I just say, take my time. I take little steps to try to get them a little more tech savvy all the time. So I have some students that can absolutely create PowerPoints, and then I have other students that 5 slides is a struggle. So we're still working in piecemeal. And I think it's great that everyone just take that step to use as much technology as possible in different ways so that you can grab students' attention, because we all learn differently.
that's true. This program, Kaizena, where did you hear about it?
It was on the list for the district for one of the sites that was an approved site for our district. And my principal asked me, because I use technology regularly in the classroom, if I was interested in learning more about Sway and Prezi and Kaizena. So I spent time over the summer looking at it, and I was able to present to our school. And then I was allowed to present at another professional development so that more teachers were able to see that there's a way to give back feedback just a little bit differently.
Just a little bit differently. That's awesome. You've used it with the students so far. How have they responded with it?
I've only used it with a small group of students because I'm using it as a way to respond to text in our guided reading. So I've started with just one group of our highest students. My students are not as proficient on 365 as I'd like them to be. And knowing that they're moving on to middle school and that the district has picked this up, that's an initiative that I feel should be the priority,
right,
so that the students aren't lagging behind when they go to middle school.
So with 365, you have them sharing documents through the OneDrive and through Word, and you've been using discussion boards. What are some other ways that you're using technology? Because it sounds like for an English and social studies class, you are using a lot of different tools, and it sounds pretty effective.
I would love to get an entire classroom up, but I think that would take a little bit more time. So as they learn and become a little more comfortable with the keyboard, especially now that we know that these fifth graders, last year fifth grade didn't take their MCAS on laptops, and this year they're responsible. And even though they did that in fourth grade, we want to make sure that the students are really familiar with the keyboard, that they're not afraid of it, and they're willing to put their best foot forward. And it's hard. Some of the students prefer paper and pencil, and then some students get a little tired looking at the screen. I understand that. When I'm looking at the screen for a while, I too get tired. So it's finding ways to create stamina so that the students are successful. So that's why little baby steps, but hopefully before the end of the year, they will be proficient.
Yeah. With teaching English and social studies, what are some of the other tools that you've seen out there that you are looking forward to trying to integrate into your own practices?
One tool that I do like to use in the classroom is readworks.org. Readworks this year is a much better site than it's ever been before. You can actually listen to the passage, the reading passage, and you can also listen to the questions. So students that are struggling, that are now up to the reading level that is fifth grade, before they go home, if I assign a homework assignment that we print out, they can listen to that homework assignment before they go, or they can listen to it in the morning. I take a couple of students who don't have that much support at home. So when they come in for breakfast in the classroom, they usually grab a laptop. If they're not on Dreambox, if they didn't do their homework, they listen to the story. I type it in for them, they listen to the story. They're able to still continue and look at grade level material and continue to be part of the classroom. I think more tools like that, if I had more time to add that in. My social studies and science and ELA, they're all intermingled. So when I look for texts to read, I look for things that deal with those topics so that we're doing two at once. So social studies really isn't its own separate class. I find reading materials so that one day I can use the English standards, and I'm using those Common Core standards and the Massachusetts standards for that passage. But then the next day we might dive into what does that actually mean for us as part of being civilians. And
I can even see that with the revolution passages. There's some out there that it gets harder to understand. And so, like, first, if you get the English part of it down, like, what are you reading? What do those words mean? And then you can take that little bit and extrapolate it out to be like, all right, what's the big picture going on here? I think can be very powerful. So I see you wrote notes. Our listeners can't see that. What is no red ink? despite the fact that you wrote it all in red.
No Red Ink is a free program that's online, and I'm a little bit of a data geek, so it is my type of place. No Red Ink is exactly what you think it is. It's all about grammar. So you can assign assignments for your students. It has a diagnostic, it has a unit, and then once they've finished those practice tests and lessons, you can actually assign a quiz just by pressing a button on all the practice that they've done. And then it shoots your kids into categories: who's falling behind, who's proficient, who's above. So I like the data that it gives me, and it allows me to have a center that is not paper and pencil, where the students are using all of the information that they like. No Red Ink allows the students to pick their sentences according to their interests. So there's basketball players, movies, television stars, anything that you can think of, presidents, authors. So they pick who they like, and then their sentences will come up with their friend's name or the people that they like. So it continues to engage them, and it saves all their work as they keep going.
And then you can turn around and see, in homonyms and all that, they're falling behind that. I know I need to get a little more practice. Maybe you can pull them aside at some point for a quick one-on-one. That sounds really cool. So it's called No Red Ink. Is it
NoRedInk.com
or
NoRedInk.com?
All right, so our listeners, hopefully that'll be in our show notes, so they'll be able to see that. I also see Edmodo on there, and knowing that we use Brightspace as an LMS, and Edmodo is also an LMS, and I see you have them both down. So how do you use them differently?
Edmodo is a great way to have a check-in with your students. So when I use the Edmodo, I look at the exact standard that we're working on in the classroom for ELA. Edmodo is great because it gives them a reading passage and questions. So all I do is click the standard. I'm able to view, I can assign it, I can time it. So if you want the students to finish it, it gives you an estimated time. But if you know that your students are a little bit slower or faster with their reading, you can give them a longer time to complete it. And it's a great check-in. There's an area where you can see the data for the students, and it'll shade in what color they are according to how they mastered that standard.
That sounds great. So did you have to set that all up on your own, or is it like a roll-in? Is it easy to set up, I guess?
The setup is so easy. When you sign in to Edmodo, you get a class code. The class code, you give it to the students. I just project it on my whiteboard. Once they sign in, their names are already there. They set up their own avatars. Once their avatars are set, you go. You're ready to upload. You hit snapshot, and you pick your standards. You hit go, you do a preview, and it's on their laptops.
Nice. As we are starting to run out of time, one of the questions that we always like to ask in the interview is, on the week leading up to school starting, there's professional development for all new teachers in the district. If you had the opportunity to stand in front of them and offer them advice or wisdom, what would that be?
I think the best advice for technology is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to use small things in your classroom. And when the kids know that you're ready to take and jump off the ledge with them, they are engaged. And that's all we want as teachers, that our students continue to be engaged.
All right, well, thank you for your time. I know that at the end of the day, it's always a rush to make sure everything is graded and set up for the next day. And then, of course, there's the drive home. So, thank you.
Thank you.
As we do with all interviews, we usually wrap up at this time talking about some of the takeaways that we had, but I want to leave that up to you today. I am by myself, so I don't want to talk to myself about the interview that I did with myself and Kiaga. She was fantastic, and she's an excellent teacher over at Sumner Ave. And so it was very nice being able to chat with her about the things that she is doing in her classroom. If you are an avid listener, which I know some of you are because I can see some statistics and such, please remember to give us a rating or review on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or TuneIn Radio or Spreaker.com, which is where the podcast is hosted. It helps us out. It gives us a frame of reference in going forward into the future. That's it for today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas, and I will see you next week.